Good morning, Farhan.
Morning, Nicholas.
Welcome to our um, first CFO Club presentation podcast on LinkedIn Live. So it's a first for all of us, and you're the first CFO we're interviewing. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. No pressure, eh?
No, none at all. So yeah, you look fine on my side, on my screen. I have my phone open here with me, so I'm checking LinkedIn Live as well as we progress with the presentation. But let us then start. Let me just talk a little bit about CFO Club. We started the CFO Club back in 2016 when we hosted the first World Congress for CFOs. Back then, SIBA as a professional body didn't yet have a offering for CFOs, and we launched our entry into the CFO field to offer professional designations and study routes and things like that in 2016. The CFO Club currently has about, I see 5,000 followers on its LinkedIn profile. And you can go to our website if you're watching this interview. It's cfoclub.co.za, and you can see some of the more than 200 podcasts that we've done so far. We post blog articles on trendy issues within the CFO profession. And I think our main claim to fame is that we are part of the International CFO Alliance, which is an alliance of CFO associations globally. We recently co-founded that alliance, and that gives us access, as well as our club members, to the global CFO frontier. And that includes countries like France and Germany, Italy, Morocco, Tunisia, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and we're ever expanding. And the two things that there's a few things that the CFO Club via the ICFOA then does is we've established work groups to give attention to aspects like sustainability and international tax and automation. We have these work groups that we invite CFOs to belong to, and our submissions then we send to the European Union and IFAC and the IASB Foundation, just to help make sure that the voice of the CFO is heard at that levels. And then we also have an annual CFO Summit. We've been attending those CFO Summits now for the last couple of years in Cancun, in Mexico, I think is my favorite. And then we also had some events in Capri, which is an amazing island just off the coast of Italy. And it's then hosted by the local CFO association, and global CFOs from all over the world can attend. And I think the biggest draw card for me on those annual events is how the CFOs then network. CFOs is part of the business operations of the company, and the leads and the networks and the opportunities that you pick up at those events are just amazing. So that's about the CFO Club. We're also on LinkedIn, like you might be seeing us now doing the LinkedIn Live. And now let me then introduce our first CFO on our LinkedIn Live. It's Farhoon Moola, CASA. I'm just going to do a brief overview of Farhoon, your CV. An experienced CFO with strong track record in financial leadership and strategic planning, skilled in financial analysis, risk management, compliance, and financial reporting, and excels in team management and fostering a collaborative environment. You've worked in various roles, which we'll be discussing today. Currently the CFO of T3 Telecoms, and previously as an Group Financial Director at Midcom, also working in financial strategies and business performance and the like. Farhan holds a BCom and a number of postgraduate diplomas in accounting from the University of Johannesburg. And as I said, he's a qualified CA. He started off as a psycho trainee at Nolan's, a very well-known auditing and accounting firm. I know Clive Nolan very well, and a big shout out to him. He's a great guy to know, entrepreneur. And then he transitioned from there into his role at Midcom Group as financial manager and later financial director. Farhan, you stayed there, I think, for about 7 years, and then moved on into your current role as CFO. And I see from your CV, there's a host of achievements which we'll also be talking today about, and that is cutting costs, increasing revenues, and steering your company through the whole COVID affair. So then let's then kick off with the questions. Let's talk about your career development, as all these interviews that's on LinkedIn always start. They start with the career development. So can you share with us why you decided to study a BCom and what attracted you to the profession?
Thank you again for the opportunity to be on this podcast, and thank you to everybody who's attending as well. So I come from, like every other Indian out there, I come from a family that's very entrepreneurial and has a lot of business acumen. So growing up in a household, it's always you walking around numbers and listening to this deal and that deal happening. At the time, my father and my uncle owned a couple of companies, and they were mainly in the property industry. And I admired their business skills and how they presented themselves out there in the world. And that was my first point of saying, I want to be a businessman. So at the time, obviously studying in that year when I was at school and completing matric, I needed to find, how do I get to becoming at the top, or how do I become the successful businessman? And chartered accountant was the way forward. I mean, there was nothing better to achieve and gain that accreditation in order to get to the top and become the businessman you want to be. So that's what drove me to become and choose this path. And that's when I started in 2008 with UJ, and I started studying my BCom accounting.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very good qualification to have, a BCom. It's like you correctly said, it teaches you so much about business. I did my BCom at University Pretoria, financial management, and then an honors. And I think the articles was the strongest point in my career development. Having those 3 years at a good practice and learning about business, like you said, the ins and outs, how it's structured, how it's set up, that even to this day, as a CEO now of SIBA, that really benefits me. You mentioned your cultural background of being entrepreneurial focused. So that would be my second question. Beyond your degree, what other experiences played a significant role in shaping your career path?
Again, it goes down to family. You know, us Indian people are very family orientated. So I speak about my late uncle, and unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity to see the success I've made out of myself. But he was one of those men out there that when he walked into a boardroom or he walked into the office, you could see this man was here for business. So I used him as my goalpost to become the person that I am today.
Oh, that's an amazing story.
He mentored me throughout my schooling career, pushed me to always get the best grades. And even if I had like a 90, he'd tell me, why couldn't you get 100? So it was a typical Indian home you came from.
But it's good to have such a family member or friend or business mentor, just to drive you to achieve more. Yeah, and thanks for sharing that story. My third question, yeah, you just mentioned that would be who would be your key influencers or mentors and how do they impact your career journey. I think you just shared with us your uncle driving you. Maybe elaborate a little bit more.
So, you know, back then, obviously, the apartheid era was very difficult for Indian men to own businesses or become successful at that time, unless only in the areas that they were living. So my uncle met, obviously, at the time with another individual, and him and this individual opened up a property company. And from there, he was kind of a silent partner. And from that, he just grew. Hey, once, I mean, 1994 restrictions were lifted in South Africa and apartheid was done. My uncle saw the opportunity and he went on to buy properties throughout the northern suburbs. And up to today, we own 2 properties in the Houghton area, where once upon a time, Visa credit card used to be one of our biggest clients renting our office space.
Oh, very interesting. So the entrepreneurial thread runs deep in your family.
Very, very deep, yeah. So my father, till to date, he deals in arts and antiques. He's one of the well-known dealers out there of arts and antiques. So those were their businesses: property, arts, and antiques.
That's an interesting story. And then both your uncle and your father sounds very entrepreneurial. You working currently as for a big corporate T3 telecoms. Is there a different mindset? How do you marry the two, from entrepreneurial to corporate?
So I must say, working in T3 telecoms, it's more of an entrepreneurial mindset, and it's more than just being the CFO or being the finance individual here. It's more dealing with the operations and the strategic part of this business. So I've married the two very well, and that's the reason why I enjoy my current role, and I really am happy where I am.
Tell me a little bit more about T3. I read briefly on the internet, telecoms company. I think started off in prepaid, but now doing financing of devices. But just share a little bit more.
Okay, so firstly, T3 is part of the larger group Blue Label Telecoms. We are an associate of them. And what we actually do is we are a distributor of SIM cards for the major networks in South Africa, being MTN, Telkom, Cell C, and Vodacom. So we distribute all prepaid SIM cards into the informal, formal sectors, and then also in the larger scales being wholesalers and retailers.
Oh, I see. And there must be a lot of competition in that space. And do you see that market growing and expanding?
So competition is a big thing in our space. I mean, it's always who's trying to cut the better deal with everybody out there. So you always got to be on your toes and be on top of it. In terms of growth, the economy has been constrained and it has taken its knock through the networks. The networks obviously have seen that impact of, especially from a prepaid perspective, the growth in people recharging or using more airtime or data has declined slightly versus previously. So I wouldn't say it's bad, but there is room for improvement.
Okay. I recently spoke with somebody from MTN, and it was interesting to know how they're diversifying their business into other sectors other than just telecom, or just giving what the current products that they have, just applying it in different packages. There's this SME development that they're doing, and so that again gives room for professional bodies. Even that I realized how much closer we need to work with technology companies. It's interesting how the economy develops with technology. It's this merging of industries. Are you also seeing it in with T3?
Yes, we are. We are.
Care to explore, maybe expand a little bit?
Yeah. So, when you look at it, the SIM card model, the SIM card business it's growing and it still continues to grow because everybody needs a SIM card to operate. I mean, you go down to the fact that your cars have a SIM card in your tracking device. SIM cards are needed in iPads. They're needed everywhere around the world. However, as much as it's needed, the growth doesn't just come from the sale of SIM card. It comes from the recharges used in obviously using the SIM card. The more recharges it goes out there, the more revenue that's earned by the networks and obviously companies like us and our competitors out there. So when you look at it, you gotta look at it from the future perspective. That is this going to continue to grow significantly over time, or is it going to slow down? So right now we've seen with the economy that it's slowing down, and hence, like you say, the MTNs and that are now looking into new avenues of going. You look at Vodacom's going into the financial services industry. So I can't give a lot of information out here on this podcast, but in the Blue Label space, there's a lot happening on the side that's not yet made out that is going to impact us.
And what you highlight is how the business model must adjust to its environment, and then there's new strategies developed. And you, the CFO, how do you? And it's clear that you are very well versed in understanding what that business model is of T3. What advice is that? Something that's new to the CFO profession, and how would a CFO better develop his business acumen skills to get those numbers to speak what the directors wants to see?
We speak of CFOs as traditional accountants, and I'll touch quickly on a presentation that I did last year at one of our management conferences. So I spent hours and hours in watching hundreds of YouTube videos trying to bring something to life to show that finance departments, CFOs, financial managers, accountants in general are not those boring people everybody looks at in a back office and thinks they're the budget blockers, or I refer to it as in my presentation as the no department. And then I still made a joke and said it's the maybe department, because always whenever you ask a guy, can you approve or not approve? Maybe I can do it, So my advice to CFOs and financial managers they're aspiring to be or in there is you got to adapt to the change. Change is inevitable. And yes, as human beings, we do not like change. It's just part of our lifestyles. But the world's ever evolving. And again, going back to this video and this presentation, something that's coming big into the space is the implementation of AI. It actually helps you bring in real data in real time instead of looking at historic data constantly and reviewing in the past. It helps you actually look into the future and forecast. Yes, it has the issue where there is an inaccuracy that may exist. But you, based in your position, sitting on the other end of that seat, knows your company, knows your business model, knows your strategy. So using this tool helps you build a better strategy for everybody going forward. So my advice to them is, please don't resist change. Embrace it. It's your friend.
But it again shows your entrepreneurial mindset. Hearing you speak about the CFO profession gets me all excited about being associated with CFOs. It's interesting to note that there's been a steady decline in the number of students that decide to study BCom. It's not only in South Africa, but also in the US. They're even changing the admission criteria, the CPA in the US. The governing body decided to lower the entry requirements and make it more wider to cast a wider net. There's a serious shortage in the US for accountants and CFOs. But what advice would you give to a student that has to decide, am I going to study, let's say, science or accounting, and why would you recommend them? And maybe address also the issue of accounting is boring, because I don't think the students understand the variety within accounting.
So again, it comes down to the individual and where they're choosing their career path, first of all, okay? And if you sit in with a science and accounting, you're on two different sides of the scale. So I think you're already confused. But looking at it from an accounting perspective, my advice to the individuals out there is accounting is not boring. Yes, I know you sit in university and you sit and learn how to reconcile a general ledger, and you learned how to interpret standards and how to recognize it in it. And that's all very important at the time when you're studying, because it lays the foundation for you as an individual, as an upcoming accountant. However, accounting is not boring. This conception of accounting being boring is completely inaccurate. And I'll take myself, for example, as a CFO today of T3 and previously the financial director of Midcom. The amount of accounting work that I deal with on a daily basis is minimal, very minimal. The reason being is out there, you have consultants and people in those areas of expertise, being accounting and tax and auditing and data, and you pick up a phone or you set up an appointment and you get this guy's input. Your role has really evolved out there. Don't look at accounting as sitting and ticking with a green pen, or balancing a GL, or balancing a bank recon, or trying to find the missing transaction. It's not boring. It's actually evolved. And I'll share something quickly with the guys on the podcast, not to take up too much time, because I know we've only got an hour. But my financial managers today that report to me, I have two beautiful ladies who report to me. And when I got here, their skills were that type where they would just sit and think they have to reconcile a general ledger. Today, they have grown their skills to be analytical, that before I could even ask them the question of why this has done this, they can give me the answer. They've already taught on that level. So again, please don't think of accounting as boring. It's not boring out there.
Thank you very much for sharing that with especially the students, but I think it's also valuable for people moving up in their career trajectory from accountant to financial manager to CFO. And just thinking back over your career, you start off in articles, which I would recommend for any aspiring CFO. That's a very good starting point. And then you get your first role and function, financial manager. At what point do you add, like you just described, that strategic element, the business acumen element to your, does it come over time? Approximately how long does that take? And what should aspiring CFOs then do in their current, let's say, accounting financial manager position to upskill themselves? Should they study? Should they read books? Should they get a mentor? What would you recommend?
So the transition from out of articles, because my articles ended, I think it was January 2016, and I wasn't there for much long post articles. 7 months later, I left and I joined Midcom as a financial manager. And that gap was enormous when I joined Midcom. It was huge. I didn't know where I was coming to go in half the time, because everything was very different from what you did in articles. It was real business experience that you needed to make decisions. And it took, I would say, 2 years before I finally got to understand. And I always share this incident, I won't say incident, this thing that happened with my previous MD. I went in with the management pack after I prepared it, and I said to him, well, here you go. And he looked at the GP percentage and he said to me, it's wrong. And I said, no, it's not wrong. I sat for hours and I've reconciled it. He says it's wrong. I'm telling you, that's not our GP. Just go and go look. After about another hour or two of investigating, I came back and said, that was the issue and I fixed it. And now he's like, the GP is right. And I sat down with him afterwards. I said to him, how did you know that? And he says, you got to think out of the box. You got to look beyond what's in front of you. He says, the problem sometimes with preparing is you get so stuck in the detail that you can't see around you. So you need to take a break and then go into the reviewing part of it. And you'll see how different it is. And it comes down again, when you're in that role, you got to learn. You got to be hungry. You got to be the sponge. Wherever you can absorb knowledge, you must just absorb it. That's the best way to become successful. And then again, going to, what gaps are out there, what would individuals do, what should they do to close this gap? We sitting on the other side of the table need to be honest with ourselves. And I always find this a very interesting conversation that you have with others out there, that nobody wants to be honest to say, I have a gap in my career. And I'll share my personal experience. When I joined T3, it was a massive jump, like from articles to Midcom. It was a massive jump from Midcom to T3. Obviously, now being part of a JSE listed company in that area, there were more requirements, more regulations, more deadlines, and it was dealing with people on a different level. It's not like walking into a boardroom of a family-owned business. And that was massive for me. So I embarked on a coaching journey, first of all, with Clive Kaplan of Green Mind Capital. And he taught me things and he showed me things in the executive space that I completely did not see. And again, I wouldn't say it's anybody's fault or they don't know this. It's once you get into this role. Because a CFO in one company is not the same as a CFO in another company. Their roles differ on almost every level possible. It's what do you have to deal with on a daily basis. So firstly, you as an individual identify your gap. Once you've identified your gap, consider what the gap is and how to close it. Is it a mentor that I need maybe to help me? So that's the first approach I took. Secondly, is it a skill that I lack that I need to maybe work on? So it could be tax, for example. Not everybody is a tax guru or tax master out there. And it's fine. It's okay. You don't have to feel ashamed of it, because I think with CFOs and CAs out there, people have this thing, oh, but you studied for 4 years and you're a CA, so you must know everything. No, guys, we don't. We actually don't. There's things we learn on a daily basis. There's things we come across on a daily basis that we don't even know how to deal with it yet. So you sit along a panel and you discuss it. Identify your gap, find where your gap is lacking, and move from there.
Okay, now that resonates so strongly with me. It's been my experience as well, and a lot of CFOs, when we interview them, they share a similar story. The big jump from qualifying and as an accountant, finishing our articles, and then ending up as a CFO. So this intrigued me so much. I did some research globally, and I found that in the US, interestingly enough, the first only about 34% of CFOs come from an accounting background. So they've kind of diversified into engineering, scientists, and one aspect that stood out for me was the MBA. As a professional body, we think hard about the story that you just relayed to us. To say, okay, but we qualify people, and then they go through this progress in their career, maybe 8 to 10 years, and they end up as CFOs. How do our designations respond to that? And then we sat down with our international colleagues and we combined a BCom with an MBA to kind of, I did my MBA, and they say, how do you know somebody did an MBA? He shares it with you, he tells you. So, and I met a few CAs and financial managers doing that MBA to kind of get that business acumen in place. What is your view of maybe re-looking at our accounting designations and qualifications to better support a person like yourself moving up in his career into the CFO role?
So I would say that, it's got to start from your articles. And I've always sat here and said, I think in articles, we need to have a bit more of a diversity involved in there. Again, I can share out of my experiences when I left articles and I had to do a VAT return for the first time at Midcom. It was like rocket science for me. but this is what I'm saying. You, as an article clerk, you could actually reconcile the VAT to sales or whatever it might be that you do out there. But to actually fill it and submit it, not many article clerks has this experience and knows how to do it. They need to incorporate a little bit more of that practical element into it, So it's all driven auditing, and I get it and I understand it and I'm for it. But we need to bring in a bit more financial management with risk and strategy involved as well. This will help prepare our future CAs, our future FMs, and our future CFOs out there to be better, well equipped to do their job and grow.
Deloitte issued a research paper on the same matter, and there's a university in Canada that looked at the issues you've raised, and they grouped the CFO functions into 4 elements. And I hope I remember them. It's the strategist, that's the first one. Then there's the relational, how you engage with your team, and I can hear a lot of what you're sharing relates a lot about training and development. You mentioned your 2 financial managers that you invest in, and then there's the normal transactional and operational aspects of being a CFO. Would you agree with this kind of 4 broad aspects: strategy, operations, HR, and maybe you can put in IT, place in IT there as well. And after that, just share with us, because I pick it up from a lot of the successful CFOs. They have this teaching ability and a wish to develop their own staff.
Yeah. So again, when I did coaching with Clive, and sorry, I touched back on a lot of practical experiences I've achieved during my career, because that's what's built me and who I am today. Pre-COVID, you've always had your CEO at the top level, and below you had all your C-suite executives, being your CFO, COO, CIO, etc. But post-COVID, the world has actually evolved and realized that the CFO has almost moved on to this mezzanine level, I call it. So, you've got your CEO at the top, and then it's like this little mezzanine level being your CFO, and the remaining C execs below it, okay? And when looking at that already emphasizes that your CFO has moved more from a how to record an accounting transaction to now being with your CEO, implementing the strategies that are drawn up, and how to filter downwards into the remaining C-suite execs, and there on to management level, and obviously further down the company ranking, okay? And I do agree with this. The CFO role has become more strategic, more operational. You're more involved in other departments than just the accounting department. You're now part of the sales meetings. You're now part of HR meetings. You're now part of how to bring in a new software. What impact does it have on the accounting part of it? How does this? The CFO gets to see almost everything, just like the CEO. And hence I say he's moved up into this mezzanine level and works even closer to your CEO, because he's building the future of the company and the strategy with him.
I totally agree. I mentioned an MBA before. Is that something that you ever considered? And advice to other CFOs or aspiring, besides an MBA, what other post-degree qualifications or courses or mentorship programs would you recommend for their continuous development?
I've got a bit of mixed feelings about an MBA. It's how you perceive it as an individual, okay? So, for example, I've now went and enrolled with CIMA, and I've now started studying towards obtaining my CGMA designation, which is more risk strategy focused versus your CA designation, because your CA is more accounting, auditing, tax, and it has its financial management, but not in the depth of your CIMA designation or CGMA. So I've chosen the CGMA part first. And the reason being is when I did research at the time, because that's one of the gaps I identified, is how to work around strategy implementation, how to be in that space. A lot of people I spoke to, a lot of people I consulted with, didn't recommend MBA to me, which was funny. And I thought that would be the go-to. Most of them recommended short courses on strategy. Most of them recommended that they've just achieved it by practical experience. Some mentioned going to see a coach. Again, that's also when I embarked on a journey with Clive from Green Mind Capital. And I then weighed up my options. And I said, I'm going to do the CIMA route. I'm going to go and obtain the CGMA, because I went through the course material. I did all my research, and I found that is the entry point, and it might be sufficient for me as an individual. That's all I need to take me to that next level. However, the person sitting on the other side may not find that way. So they might feel that MBA is better for them. So I'm not for it. I'm not against it either. It comes down to you as an individual. You have a gap, find your gap. You know the best way to close it. In terms of other courses, mentoring is always a great thing to do, because when you mentor with people, you learn about their experiences. You learn what's out there. And again, we don't know everything. So we're always learning. So look at getting a coach, getting a mentor, somebody who can guide you through your process. I really enjoyed my coaching. It took me to a thinking in my professional and personal life on a different level. That's what I can say. And again, when I was looking for courses in it today, I came across a institution called Udemy. And I found on there that there were a whole lot of CFO, FM, financial manager courses, should I rather say. And even it comes down to someone who's confused, and we go back to one of your questions previously of a person whether they don't know whether to take science or accounting. It's like a 6-month course. It gives you a brief overview of what a financial manager does, what he touches on, where he goes. And I would recommend it to people out there. If you're confused in your career, go and go look at this course, do it. It doesn't cost a lot of money because everybody's always about the cost involved there. And it gives you an outline. Maybe you wake up and you're like, I'm not going to be a financial manager. I want to go be a neurologist as an example. But that's fine. At least you've done it. And on this place, while doing this research, I found that on it they have 2 specific courses that caught my mind. And I'm just going to read what I've wrote because I've written it down because I wouldn't have remembered it otherwise. It's the CFO Leadership Program, the one, and the other one's called the Office of the CFO, a seat at the strategic leadership table. And I find that to be really valuable.
That sounds about right. We offer similar courses with our academy, and then we have a MOU with the AICPA and CGMA because we do also want to support our own designation holders to move into whatever area is suitable in their careers. But I agree 100% with the examples you shared. And what's very clear is that there's a big movement between as you qualify as an accountant and then what you need to end up as being a successful CFO. Now let's move on to a bit more hypothetical policy questions. We asked this of all our attendees. It's now soon the Minister of Finance delivering his budget speech. And if you were appointed as the Finance Minister in South Africa, what key actions would you take in your first 100 days?
This is a good question and a tricky one, eh? So, the one thing we sit here and we all judge government, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it because it's the truth, okay? We all judge government, and yes, there's a lot of little things that happens in between that we don't see, and we hear it on the news, and it's made out about corruption, whatever the case might be. But if I had to be appointed, hypothetically, in my first 100 days, the most important thing that I feel as the finance minister would be is to meet with business leaders across the country, nationally, understand the different industries and sectors of what they experience in. Yes, there's the usual cut budget costs, cut government expenses, reduce this, reduce this. Yes, that's all given. So with this question, what I'm trying to say is that that's the norm. You got to do that as your finance minister. But to make the country great again and to grow that economy, meet with these individuals, meet the CFOs of all the different companies out there, the different industries, the leaders in that industries, and understand what they experience on the ground, what they experience as business leaders, because that helps you as your finance minister to make the right decisions, driving investor confidence and growing the economy.
That's a very good point. I think we need to move you into that position soon. It may be opening up. We'll see at this year's elections. But I've met the Minister of Finance a few times and attended some of these business meetings that you're referring to. And it is very difficult. It's easy for us to criticize government and the officials, and sometimes we should, but it's a difficult position to manage all these moving parts. But I like your suggestion, having a meeting with CFOs. And that leads me to my next question, professional networks. We recently entered into an agreement with the Finance Minister of Gauteng, the MSc of Finance. And just like you said, thought about why don't we connect CFOs with the Gauteng government? Let's make that a starting point. And we launched something as the CFO Club called the CFO Roundtable. We had our first launch event with some of our partners, strategic partners in this event. But it's exactly as you said, CFOs have so much to share. They're not policy minded, so they can give you, the minister or the MEC, the lowdown of what is needed to grow the economy. And we hope through these roundtables we'll be able to achieve that conversation that I think is needed. And then I've mentioned previously our membership on the ICFOA, the International CFO Alliance. And I think that is to move beyond just South Africa, but start speaking with the finance ministries of other countries. I attended the mining Indaba just now, and the amount of information I gained just by attending one of these events after the Indaba, and the connections made and the deals being made, that is significant. So as a closing question, would you recommend CFOs join networks like the CFO Club, participate in CFO roundtables, and how can we as a club be more attractive to CFOs?
100%. Definitely, the guy should definitely join such associations, such bodies, and such events. The reason being is we all have experiences from different points of views, which we can add in. And again, like you say, meeting with the MEC, Finance Minister of Gauteng, it helps. He doesn't understand every single thing. He's not an expert in all the industries out there. And if we all collaborate together and we bring this to the table, it just makes life easy for everyone out there. So I definitely think I agree with it. I'm for it.
Oh, no, brilliant. I just need to check here. We going live on LinkedIn. I see the team did post some questions. Let me then move on. Just want to see. Okay, that was more like a comment. Yeah, so there's a question here. What can you recommend for non-CAs to move into the FM CFO role at a large company? I had a few interesting engagements. We met or interviewed the CFO of Hollard a while back, and he's an actuary. And then I met the CFO of some other big corporates. Their names escape me now. And the one was an attorney, and the other did a BCom MBA. How would you recommend from somebody that's not a CA, possibly the person is reading job requirements and seeing people want CA essays? There's not really a consideration of ACCA, CGMA, or the CFO essay. How would you then convince a board or an HR department? As this was one of the questions from the audience.
Sure. So if you look at the market at the moment, the market's opening up to CIMA. There's a couple of positions at the time when I was applying that spoke about CIMA. They actually wanted CIMA candidates versus CA candidates. So yes, the majority of South Africa is driven by CASA, and hence SAICA has also taken the collaboration to join with CIMA and allow CASAs to do a quick shift by writing one level or one case study to gain a designation. So they're working with it instead of against it. So if you don't have the CASA, look at doing your CIMA. It is getting recognized in South Africa. I've done the homework. I've looked at it. You will get it there. And again, if you've just got a simple BCom, my advice to everybody out there is going to do your honors. Do an honors in accounting, do an honors in financial management more, and then branch off from there, because from there you can go into a master's of finance, and it will also bring you along the same route. But that's what I would say.
Okay, that's a good response. Farhan, thank you so much for participating in our first podcast. I think it went down without a glitch. We shared some valuable information, and if I can summarize, I think your entrepreneurial background, your parents did you a very good service to make you the person that you are. You mentioned being open-minded and like a sponge, and just be willing to take in new information. And then we spoke about the new role of the CFO. We spoke about the strategic and operational and HR perspectives that's now needed, and this continuous drive for learning. And then we spoke about different routes to develop into this CFO role. And from our side, as part of the CFO Club and the Chartered Institute of Business Accountants, we looked at all these gaps within how do you develop towards a CFO, and then registered a designation for CFOs. We're the first one to do so. It's on the registered with SAQA, requires a BCom honors and MBA. And we've been working now with the International CFO Alliance to see if we can develop a competency framework or a competency skill standard that is kind of the norm globally. And we've been our colleagues in Italy have submitted a proposal to the European Union that they are now considering to see if we can say that if a CFO wants to develop, these are the skill sets that they need to do. And once we have that in place, we'll be able then to talk with employers and universities and then develop the future CFOs. Just a final few words from you, Farhan.
Sure. Firstly, again, thank you, Nicholas, and to the guys out there for giving me this opportunity to be on this podcast and sharing my experience and knowledge with everyone. And in closing, I would say, guys, again, accountants are not boring. Please take away this assumption that we are boring people that sits in the back office. We are here to be your people's strategic partner. Let the CFOs show you what they're made of. That's what I will say, because they have a lot to contribute and a lot to give out there, as well as the financial managers. Don't think of them as your number crunchers and the person who releases your bank payments on the odd days. They're more than that.
Thank you very much, Farhan. That's a good call to action. And I think then we'll be closing our engagement. And the recording is now available on LinkedIn at the CFO Club. So if anybody on LinkedIn, go to CFO Club and you can watch it there. Farhan, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you to the audience.